This week in the conversation, I'll be speaking with author Shelly Cruz. She's an impressive writer, and we're going to be talking about her fantastic book titled Amor and the 305. And I'm pretty sure, so once you hear the word 305, if you've lived in South Florida or in Florida for that matter, so you would know exactly, you would have an impression of what the story is all about. But before we get into this interesting conversation with wonderful writer Shelly Cruz, I also want to remind you of my own literary accomplishments. I always say that every time with the two books, Bittersweet Memories of Last Spring, and that's book one, and Last Spring was Bittersweet, that's book two. So don't forget, I always say the best way to support my literary journey is to get copies of, get a copy of both books. And also you can encourage your friends, your readers, whatever book club you belong to, encourage them to get a copy of it. And also remember that the conversation is produced by CSMS Magazine. So the best way to support also both the magazine and the podcast is to encourage your friends to subscribe to it. And of course, at the end of the video, if you like the conversation, I'm sure you will like it. Don't forget to hit the like button. So let's get started. Again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening or this morning, it depends on where you are across the world, with an impeccable writer. Her name is Shelly Cruz, and we're going to be speaking about her wonderful book titled Amor and the 305. And if you live in South Florida, if you've been to South Florida, if you're a native of South Florida, once you hear 305, you know exactly what we're talking about. So, Shelly, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Ardain. Thank you so much for having me. I'm appreciate your invitation to be here, and I'm excited to chat with you about Amor and the 305. Hello, everybody. I'm Shelly, and I write contemporary romance, steamy, emotional, angsty.
Yeah.
I'm told I rip your heart out when I write books. I don't know if that's true or not, because I just write them. I don't really know, but you know.
I can say it. I was going to bring this question, but since you bring it up right off the bat, I have to say that your characters are so real, and that's what readers really like. They are not interested in Cornelian type of characters. You paint the story just like we human, we see it every day, or we live it every day. They're flawed, for sure. Also, we have a lot of flaws in our life too. So you're real. You do not, I would say that you do not, editorialize. You do not moralize. You tell it exactly like it is. And that's interesting.
Isn't that what life is?
What do you think? That's something that you learned from the back or from as a novelist?
So when I read books, sometimes I mostly read romance books, and I wanted to write romance books because I wanted to see more Latinas like me in the pages. But sometimes I read books and I think that's just too far-fetched for me. It's just, there's, and I understand we read books to sort of, escape our everyday and all the things that are happening around us. Right. But I personally like to read about people like me, people like you and me, who live our daily lives. And sometimes life is hard. But amidst all that, there's love and there's romance And so when I decided to write, I wanted to write in that manner. Because it's just the way I like to consume books. And I think because I like to consume books in that manner, that I also wanted to write. Kind of, I think also is I'm a lawyer full time. And one of the things I struggled with when I started writing is I'm not very good at writing fluff, like all the fluffy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because, legal writing is very technical and all the things. It's
Right.
fact, 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 fact. So
Uh-huh.
very much the opposite of a fiction novel, romance novel, any type of fiction, really. So I struggled with that. And so I think I was able to find like the happy medium with I can write real people, but in a fiction story. And so it allows me to be a little technical, but also to write with this fluff, as I like to refer to it in fiction, because nobody wants to read a book that's just a fact, a fact, a fact, a fact. Because at the end of the day, we are reading to enjoy.
Exactly.
And so I found that by writing real flawed characters, that I could find that groove to write fiction.
And if I want to add from the perspective of a reader, that it fits exactly what I look for in reading a good story. I have to say, Shelly of Marisol, if I'm going to say that, I read the story 5 days, but I did that within 3 weeks because of my professional obligation. But in 5 days, I read the whole story. Because at some point, you make a lot of references of what I have also as an immigrant, been through, or lived, and especially I spent a big chunk of my life living in South Florida. So, and every single place, I know the place, I know the area. Of course, what you do as a novelist, which you also, I like you at beautiful novelistic prose. So that also embellished the story. It put me right on the at the setting exactly where the action is taking place.
Yeah, I like to make the city or the setting a character. At the beginning I was like, do I make it a real place, or do I make it do I create a fiction city or town or whatever? And I decided to do a real city because people very much embody the city that they live in, or their location, whether it's a city or a small town, or regardless of the size. But people really take on a lot of their surroundings and just their day-to-day life and the way they do things and the way they enjoy the things that they do in extracurriculars or whatever. So when that's one of the decisions I decided is I'm going to write real cities that people might know, which also, as a reader, I love watching a movie or a TV show or reading a book and say, oh, I've been there. Oh, I know where this is. Oh, this is like so well explained or captured, or in, whatever the medium, it sort of helps me connect a little bit more to what I'm consuming, whether it's a TV show or a movie or a book.
And you know what? Although the story, what I come away with, although the story is a romance story, but there are two strong aspects also. Besides the romance, there is an immigrant journey in the story, and also there is the story of fate also in it. And also the vexing question is the issue of domestic abuse.
Right.
Now, I'm going to start with the romance. But before I do that, Shelly, I know the beginning of the story, you set the stage in Boston, Massachusetts, which is the place I know. At the beginning, you talk about your life and with your friends and all that. Although the big chunk of the story The
Man.
story unfolding in Miami. So I remember in a private conversation we had, and you told me that you were born in but raised
Born
in
and raised.
in an immigrant household. So maybe you may not live the immigrant journey as much as I lived it, or I continue to live it. But you captured that very well, and you are able to explain it, to put it into prose. And that's exactly what I always try to do writing realistic fiction. Because you
Yeah.
cannot write an immigrant story without making it so real. So people can get, connect with.
Yeah. I
Let
mean,
me ask you.
my mom's an immigrant. So I grew up, I personally, was born in the United States. So I'm not an immigrant, but my mom came from Argentina. My dad is from Puerto Rico. So technically he's not an immigrant because it's a US territory, but it is very different living in Puerto Rico than it is here in the, contiguous United States. So I grew up very much in an immigrant household. And my surroundings were very much not immigrant, right? I grew up in a semi-affluent neighborhood. We lived in the working class neighborhood, but just outside of Boston and Newton. My mom was a housekeeper, and my dad worked in this plastics company there where they made rolls of plastic for whatever it was. And so my entire childhood was based upon the immigrant experience. Being raised by my mother and my father, who we spoke Spanish at home. We weren't allowed to speak English. And of course, when you're young and you're trying to find yourself and your identity and all these things, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
I felt very much out of place because my name is Marisol, and I grew up with Jennifer's and Melissa's and Anna's and, very American.
Exactly.
So with the name, I'm very tall. I'm 6 feet tall. I was even when I was a younger child and I hadn't hit my growth spurt, I was still taller than all the other kids. I have, this crazy hair when I was young, and I spoke Spanish. And so I didn't blend very well. And as a kid, you just want to blend.
Of course.
And so I feel like that story needs to be told. And that's another book for another time. But in this book that we're talking about today, I very much wanted it to bring to life. And this may be on your agenda to speak about, but growing up in Boston, outside of Boston, is, I was, oh, you're Spanish. And, I tried to very much tell people I speak Spanish. I'm not Spanish from Spain, I'm a Latina is the way I identify. And I thought I had a lot of experience being a Latina, but then I moved to Miami. And one of the reasons I moved to Miami is I wanted to be around more of the Latin culture, and Miami is
The
very
ideal place.
It's like the place, right? It's very much like a lot of people here from Latin America. And so when I got here, I was culture shocked, and I realized I don't know anything about Latinos. I know so little, because there's so much diversity even between the Latinos, depending on what country you come from. The dialect that you speak, the words that you use. And my husband is very much, he likes to, make jokes, and we're always laughing. And so some of the words that I grew up saying for him, who's Cuban, they were words that were maybe not so appropriate in the context. But I didn't know, because you don't know what you don't know. But he would try to, he would say, go ask the lady over there for this. And knowing how it would result. And we all laugh in the end. But those are the types of culture shock things that I wanted to write that, because from the outside, when you're from the outside of the Latino community, my perspective and my experience is that people assume we're all the same, and we're not. And so I didn't know like what this, the pastelitos de guayaba were, and one of my friends who reads, as I write, she's like, how do you not know what that is? I was like, I just didn't know, so it was important for me to write that, because there's so many distinct differences between the Latinos and where they come from and things like that. And that's kind of what I'm trying and embody in Amor in the 305 in a way that makes it enjoyable, that people want to keep reading. And that's why I chose as a romance novel, because, there's a romance, yes, but like you said, it's not only romance. For me, the romance is the secondary story of my books, even though it's categorized as a romance book because it has a happily ever after and those things. But, romance gets a bad name. So I like to write these things, and, I could talk for days about it.
Listen, the story is being told, to me, from my understanding, from two protagonists.
Yes.
Now, when Amore is in the story, is telling his own story, expressing his deep-rooted feeling for Saul, but he always makes reference to his Cuban background, the food, the music, the coffee in the morning and all that, which I can easily identify with. So, but also there's another element into it. I have an impression that he's teaching Saul how to become a true Hispanic or American. Yeah. I get that impression of it, because as you portray, he was born in Cuba, and he came to the United States, which the protagonist explains it very well himself, and throughout the story. Let me ask you this: what made you decide to write a story using two protagonists? Usually, in stories like this, you can have a very strong character as playing a supporting role. But I have the impression these two characters, Saul and Amore, just seem to be somewhat, they interweaving, as I delve into the story. Why you chose that?
So I think the main reason is because I like to read books in dual point of view.
Okay.
Because, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango.
Correct.
So when I'm reading, I like to know, well, what is she thinking when this is happening? What is he thinking? So I wanted to really write both perspectives. But I thought about at one point maybe writing just Amaury's point of view, because the primary reason I chose to write this story in this way is because of Amaury's journey from Cuba to the United States.
Right.
Because the journey that's made in the book is actually what my husband lived through. Like, it's his lived.
Hold on a second now. So that means you got a lot of help from him writing the story, right?
I got a lot
real. It is so real.
I got a lot of help from him, and I got a lot of help from his friends. Because he came over with 7 other people,
right?
But so many of their friends also came over separately from my husband. So, my husband speaks with a very thick accent when he speaks in English. And we travel a lot. And when we go somewhere, inevitably at some point, the conversation ends up, you have an accent. Where are you from? Oh, you're from Cuba. And that's how the conversation starts. Right. And so one day I said to him, this story needs to be written. We need to tell that story. That story, because everybody's fascinated by it. What? Oh, it's leaves everybody speechless. And so I wanted to write that. So that's how this book idea came to me. So I thought maybe I'll just write it from his point of view. But then I remembered, well, when I write, I like to read both points of view.
Mhm.
And I decided, okay, well, Sol has a lot of me, my personal elements in it. So I said, okay, we can tell this sort of like a realistic type of way, fictionalized in certain aspects, and to give both point of views.
Mhm. So Miami is so elevated in the story. You know, when you talk about Miami, when you talk about the places, the restaurants, the South Point Beach. As a matter of fact, when I was in my first year of college, I used to have a little friend. We used to take, strolls all the way down to South Point, every weekend. And then we would go all the way up to Holiday Beach. I don't know if you know that. It's an area between Brown and right at the entrance as you going north on the beach.
North on Collins Avenue, yeah.
Exactly. So we used to have party every Sunday afternoon. Yeah. So you can imagine how I enjoy the story, you know. But let me ask you this now: how the public in Miami received your story?
I mean, everybody who I know that has read it has told me, wow, like you really captured it really, really well. I've been here for 20 years. I've been here for a long time. So I feel like I know the city pretty well. But there's just something about being a native, right? There's certain things. And again, some of the people who read as I write, or who are my beta readers who read before I publish, they were not all of them, they were most Miami natives.
Miami natives, okay.
And all of them said, wow, you really captured like really the essence of what it is because Miami is, sure, it's in the United States, it's in Florida, it's not the capital of Florida, but it is such a unique city. And it's really hard. Sometimes it's hard to explain it. So I was trying to capture it through the characters and their actions and where they go and what they do and what they eat and things like that, to be able to portray really what it is to, like, a day in the life, right? A day. What is it like being here in Miami?
I know you also when you talk about when you talk about the soul's relationship with Amore, and it's just like something when you're building a house.
Yeah.
You lay the foundation, and then you take the reader all the way up to that first encounter. You see what I mean?
If you want it to last, that's what you gotta do.
Okay. So, did you share that with her? Yeah.
Did I share that with who?
Well, I mean, throughout the manuscript, the whole manuscript, as you're writing it, do you read some part of the manuscript with him as you?
I mean, there's parts that like we discuss, and I said, this is what I'm writing and this is what I'm doing, and what do you think? Or sometimes, if you remember, there's parts of the book, where Amaudi says something like, I don't know how to say this in English, and he says the word in Spanish, right? Or maybe he would mispronounce something in the book.
I was going to come to that in a second.
And I would say, Alex, how do you say this? Say this word for me, or say this, or do that, because I'm trying to, again, capture the realness of it. And a lot of the things that have like the true elements, they were discussed with him. And some of the things he's like, I can't really remember, that was so long ago in Cuba, I don't really know. So I'd have to talk to his friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, tell them what I was writing about. Like, I'm writing this scene, I'm writing this, and I'm writing that. I need a little bit of help. And they were all very forthcoming. They were all very excited about it. Because again, they are in a similar situation and it's a
I mean,
story that needs to be told.
how hard it is to write an immigrant story.
It's extremely difficult. I think I know the story well, just because Alex and I have been together for 22 years. I've heard it numerous times, right? I can't even count how many times. I've been with his friends. I've been with his family. Like the conversation, we tell people. So, but I still, wondered, am I doing it correctly? Am I giving it justice? Am I doing what they will feel proud of? Like, because it's not my story. I'm just telling it for Alex, his friends, and countless other Cubans who, took the same journey.
And you say that.
So extremely difficult. I really, I gave it to several people who have that journey, because to get other perspectives to ensure the authenticity, and I think I did a pretty good job at capturing what Alex really wanted to convey in Amauri.
That's exactly what I thought also. Because I just published like a duo, split into two books, which is Bittersweet Memories. But this one is a character-driven story, but it's an immigrant journey. Now, through the prism of what I have been through when I came to the United States. So that's why you can understand why I relate so much to your story. Uh, but you make a lot of work with using Spanish, and is that because your readers you expect them to enjoy? Because I do that too. In every single story I write, I infuse a lot of Creole and also the French words and them to spice the story, obviously, So you do the same, obviously. So did you really have that in mind to spice
So for this book in particular, I did it because that's what it's like living in Miami. Living in Miami.
English?
Most people speak Spanish. Straight up just Spanish all the way. But if not, it's Spanglish. 100%. When I moved to Miami, I did not speak Spanglish. I either spoke in English or I spoke in Spanish. I didn't mix it because I wasn't accustomed to it. Because in Boston, it was either this or that. There was no mix. And so here, easily, it just comes. And I'm a lawyer and I do it with my clients. I have to sometimes catch myself to not do it in court because it's so easy. But like in my first novel, I have some Spanish, not nearly as much as in this book, because I think and feel in Spanish, and I think and I feel in English. And so if you remember at the beginning of our conversation, I said, one of the reasons I started to write is I wanted to see Latinas in the books.
Right.
And that's just my life.
No.
My life, sometimes I'm with a friend or a group of friends who do not speak Spanish, and I want to say something to them and I don't remember, or the English phrase or word is not coming to me. Because I can't I think of it in Spanish, right? And so for me, it was important to convey that and include that in the book. And in all my books, really. I intend to include at least a little bit. And so one of the things, some of my beta readers are non-Spanish speakers, know no words, and I have them specifically look at those sections because I don't translate. I don't give a glossary. Because yes, now we have phones and we can Google stuff, right? But really, if you're out and about and you hear something, you might not understand it. So sometimes we're looking for contextual clues, like, what is his body language? So those types of things. And so what I do
I'm
in the
gonna read
book,
something here that you say that was on page 317 at the beginning of chapter 30.
let me get my book here. 317. Okay.
317. And when Amari, is how I pronounce his name, he speaks. And he's describing Saul. And he says, she's sprawled across the couch, wearing only her underwear and bra. One of the things I love about her is she's unassuming. She wears what she makes her feel comfortable. Bra is pink, underwear black. I don't think I've ever seen her wearing a matching set. And I remember when I saw you the first time, is that exactly how you were? And it's so nice to be able to describe yourself from the perspective of another person. So I really like this one so much. And that's what makes the story so real too. Now, I know that realistic fiction, I'm not just immigrant fiction, is on the rise again. Maybe thanks to authors like you, like Mike Budman, who also he writes beautiful immigrant stories, and writers like Chimamanda Adichie Ogosi. She's Nigerian. She also writes great stories too, immigrant stories. But these are the stories that are quite different from stories from the 1930s and 40s.
right.
Because these stories were written from the perspective of European immigrants, and our story is just like you would say, story from the global South coming to the United States. And then expressing, how trials and tribulations as we're trying to get, assimilated to a new society. So what was your reaction at the end of the manuscript when you realized that this is it?
My first reaction was, is anybody going to like it?
We all do that.
That was like the little imposter that's always in the back of my head.
We all do that, right?
But then after after that goes away, I go back to, is this story enough? Does it do the Cuban plight justice? Is it are they going to feel seen, heard, acknowledged if they read this story? Because it's not mine to tell, right? If my husband wasn't Alex, and if it was somebody else who didn't have this experience,
Right.
I never would have written this book.
Okay.
Right? I wrote it because I had a lot of conversations with him. And I wrote it because he wanted to do it. But he's not a writer. He's not into any of that stuff. So together we did it. And so
in other words, it was a duo project.
He collaborated a lot. Because I've never been to Cuba. I don't know what it's like. I don't know what he was feeling. I don't know what he was thinking. He had to tell me all those things. So when you're reading the inner monologue that Amaury has, and when you're reading the things that he's sharing with Soledad, those are things that Alex and his friends shared with me. I sat down and I took notes and I listened and I asked questions and because I really needed to understand. And the truth is that I know what they told me, but I don't understand it. Because unless you live an experience like that, you don't know what it's like.
Exactly.
I can imagine, but I don't know. And so at the end of the manuscript is, will they be, seen and heard? Are they going to feel that when they read this story?
And also, there's another thing also. So, I mean, you don't write to please everyone.
That's right.
If this is what you're looking for as a writer, you're never going to find it.
No, reading books is subjective.
Exactly. There is some sort of a resentment within certain sectors of society. I can say from my own experiences, completely reject writing immigrant stories for the reason now we know the crisis in the border, Texas,
right.
All kinds of things against immigrant. We know that. But at the end of the day, your story will always, 1,000 years from now, it's still going to be a relevant story.
Right.
Because you write from the heart.
Right. And I think one of the things that I think about when like you said, books are not for everybody. I can love a book and you cannot like it, and vice versa. Right. Which is why reviews are great, but reviews are more for readers. And like sometimes I'll read reviews of books and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll read the book and I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't feel any of the things that all these people said. I felt all these other things, right? Because it's so subjective, because we all consume so differently. But I didn't write. Of course, I want people to read my books, right? Because there's stories that should be shared. But I wrote because I wanted to write it. Because I like to write.
Let me ask you a question, because I know we've been talking for the longest now. This is the time now I will switch. Let me ask you this question. Before you write the story, did you actually read some immigrant writers, authors?
No.
Not really.
I read some authors like Adriana Herrera, Priscilla Oliveiras, what's this other woman that I read? Several Latina authors. I read their books. Some of them capture some of the Latin influence and things like that. But I didn't specifically seek out any immigrant authors. I read all the time. And so I may have crossed some stories, but I didn't go looking for them.
Okay, but who's your preferred author of all time? It doesn't have to be a Latino or Latina.
My number one top author is Tarryn Fisher. She's actually from South Africa. She lives here in the United States. She's from South Africa. She came to the United States when she was a young girl. She grew up in Miami. She lives in the Pacific Northwest now. And she writes romance, but it's like the anti-hero romance, and she's a very big supporter of women. And I followed her writing since she wrote her first book in 2012. Wow. She was independently published because nobody wanted to give her a deal.
What is her name again, you say?
Tarryn Fisher, Tarryn Fisher. And then she got picked up by a publisher. She's released, I think she released her most recent book, it was like a month ago, Good Half Gone. She's, in my opinion, she's like a word craft. Like she writes so well, and she really makes you think. And she's always rooting for the villain, and the villain in her stories is the woman.
Wow.
So it's very powerful writing in my perspective, right? But then if you go on Goodreads or you go online, you read people's reviews, and these books that I love that I've consumed, some of them I read multiple times, and then I read reviews and they're so negative, which is why books are so subjective, right? Okay. She's my number one. I also like to read Kennedy Ryan.
Okay.
She's a Black author from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. She writes incredible romance. I love her writing. I love it.
Okay, so now let's switch from literature into something more realistic. You talk about food a lot.
I love to eat.
So, are you a great cook?
Um, I'm an okay cook. I think I'm
In okay.
Alex. So Alex is a really good cook.
Yeah.
He's actually cooking right now. Um,
Yes.
he
Okay.
he makes he makes all the Cuban food.
Okay.
Um, I usually make like pasta and like sort of the Italian type of stuff because I learned that in my past life, before I met him. Um, and then a lot of the times we're in like when he's cooking, like I'm in the kitchen and I'm kind of like a sous chef. I'm helping him. Like, what do you need? You need this, you need that. Hand me that. Pass this over. Right. So I love to eat. I like to cook sometimes, but I really love to eat.
So how about music? I mean, I know you talk about the music also. Is salsa your favorite?
Um, I like a little bit of everything. I'm a variety girl. There's times that I like to listen to Latino music. And like right before I moved to Miami, I used to watch this channel called HTV, Hispano TV, and it was all music videos of Latinos, uh, you know, singers like Chayanne and Ricardo Arjona and Ricardo Montaner and all these other Latino artists.
Mhm.
Um, and I was loving it, right? And so I listened to it. So if we were on a drive, like from a 4 hour drive, and I had my playlist on, you would hear Chayanne, who's a Puerto Rican pop singer. He's like one of my top favorite Latino artists. You would hear Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
You would hear Taylor Swift.
Okay.
You would hear some country music in there, Florence and the Machine. New Kids on the Block are like one of my biggest boy band groups because ever since I was a child. So there's a little bit of everything. There's a mixture.
Mhm. Okay. But is there any particular one that you would consider
Um, if I had to choose like a not a top artist, it would be the New Kids on the Block.
the new hit?
Yeah, they there's like a special place in my heart for them. Like I go to their concerts, they make me feel some sort of way, and so I would have to choose them.
Now, let me ask you my last question. Marisol, is there any really advice you would want to give to a young person who would want, desires to embark upon a journey of writing immigrant fiction so beautifully as you just did? So, what advice would you give that person?
Write the story, and just because one person says no, that's okay. Maybe 100 people say no. That's okay because your story is not for everybody. And that's okay. So write the story you want to write for you with the knowledge that not everybody's going to read it and like it, and that's okay. But you wrote it for you, and really anybody else who reads it and enjoys it is a bonus.
And with that, I'm just going to say it has been such a pleasure to have had the privilege to speak with impeccable author Shelly Cruz, also known as Marisol Cruz.
Thank you, Ardain. Thank you for having me. Really, I enjoy speaking with you so much.